This truck violates our community aesthetic standards. That's how Victoria Sterling introduced herself to me the minute I pulled up to my new place. She was standing there, arms crossed, blonde hair perfectly coiffed, already pointing at my rented U-Haul like it was some kind of biohazard. She called the cops on my moving truck, thinking she could steamroll me like she'd done to countless neighbors before. Little did she know, she wasn't dealing with a hapless victim. She was dealing with Elias Thorne, government investigator, and she had just walked straight into a cold case I'd been planning to close for 15 years. I'd been dreading that Tuesday morning. Not because I didn't want the house. My Uncle George's ranch on Cypress Drive was beautiful, but because I knew the warning he'd left me in his final letter. Victoria Sterling made my last 2 years a living hell. Thorne, maybe you can finally do something about it. I specialize in HOA abuse cases, the systemic kind, and I knew exactly what that meant. I'd been fighting people exactly like Victoria ever since what happened to my little sister, Clara. 15 years ago, Clara had been just 12, terrorized by an HOA tyrant who used the exact same playbook. Fake rules, arbitrary enforcement, police calls over nothing. We had to move across the country just to get Clara away from that nightmare, but the fear stayed with her. Now, here I was, inheriting my next case, and this time, things were going to be different. I was barely out of the truck when Victoria, late 50s, expensive tracksuit, eyes like chips of blue ice, came marching over. Before I could introduce myself, she was already shaking her head. "Excuse me, are you the new owner?" When I nodded, she gave me a look like I was a criminal. "Well, I'm Victoria Sterling, HOA president, and that truck is in direct violation of our community aesthetic standards." I played dumb. "What exactly is the violation?" I asked, trying to sound reasonable. Her eyes lit up. This was her favorite part. "Red moving trucks are not permitted in our community between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. It's clearly stated in Section 4.7 of our guidelines. I've read more bylaws than anyone should ever have to, and I knew no legitimate HOA has rules about moving truck colors. But instead of calling her out, I decided to see how far she'd run with the lie. "Oh, I had no idea," I said, pulling out my phone to start recording. "Could you show me your badge number so I can file a proper report?" Her face flushed crimson. "Badge number? I don't need a badge. I've been HOA president for 8 years, and I know these rules better than anyone." Got her. I knew the state housing code mandated a 6-year term limit. She'd just confessed to illegally holding office for 2 years too long. I kept recording and made a mental note. But Victoria wasn't done. She was just escalating. "Since you clearly don't understand how things work, let me call the police to explain the situation." She dialed 911 like she was reporting a murder. "Yes, officers at Cypress Drive. We have a new resident causing a public disturbance with an unauthorized moving truck." I just stood there, watching the moving guys exchange bewildered glances. We had driven straight into an alternate reality. 20 minutes later, 2 patrol officers showed up, looking exactly as bored and weary as I expected. The older officer came straight to me. "Sir, can you tell me what's going on?" I could tell by his tone that he'd dealt with Victoria before. I explained the red truck aesthetic violation. He sighed quietly. "She calls us a lot." That's when Victoria made her second biggest mistake. She marched over and announced, "Officers, this man is clearly unfamiliar with our community standards. I've been HOA president for 8 years, and I can assure you that red moving trucks are strictly prohibited." The older officer raised a single eyebrow. "Ma'am, with respect, HOA presidents can only serve 6 years maximum under state law. Are you sure about that timeline?" Victoria went white but immediately doubled down. "I know the law better than anyone. I've been protecting this community's values since 2015. The officers exchanged a look that confirmed everything. After 10 more minutes of her ranting, they finally told her the truck was legally compliant and that she needed to let us finish. She was furious. But what really caught my attention was the way she was studying me, like she was trying to figure out my weaknesses. She was already planning her next move. As the moving truck pulled away, a sweet older lady, Margaret Shun, came walking over from the house next door with a plate of homemade brownies. "Welcome to the neighborhood, dear," she said, glancing at Victoria's retreating scowl. "You handled that very differently. Most folks either fight back and make it worse, or they give up. You did neither." I looked at Uncle George's house, then at a photo of Clara I'd unpacked. a 12-year-old face consumed by anxiety. 15 years ago, my little sister was terrorized by an HOA president using the exact same tactics, I told Margaret. This time, things are going to be different. This time, she picked the wrong target. That evening, I called my supervisor at the Department of Housing. I inherited my uncle's ranch today, I reported. The HOA president, Victoria Sterling, fits our target profile perfectly. She's illegally holding office for 8 years. She's already made false police reports, and she's showing classic signs of systematic harassment. I'm requesting permission to begin an undercover investigation. The approval came through within the hour. Victoria thought she was dealing with a random new neighbor who didn't know the rules. She had no idea she was about to go up against a man who'd made a career out of taking down people exactly like her. The next morning, the harassment campaign began in earnest. An envelope was stuffed under my front door, a formal HOA violation notice. The violation: failure to properly maintain front yard landscaping to community standards. I walked outside and had to laugh. Uncle George's yard was pristine. But according to Victoria's notice, my lawn was 1.3 inches too long, and I owed a $250 fine. She had actually taken the time to measure my grass with a ruler. Over the next week, the citations kept coming. My mailbox was the wrong shade of black, $150. My car was parked in my own driveway 17 minutes over the visitor limit, $100. Then the big one: failure to submit required landscaping plan to HOA board, $200. No such rule existed in the bylaws. Victoria was literally making up violations as she went along. But here's the thing: I needed her to keep going. I needed her to show me her entire playbook. So, I did something that probably stunned her. I paid the first fine, all $250 of it. I walked over to her house, knocked, and handed her a check with a bright smile. "Karen, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain these rules to me. I had no idea HOAs were so detailed. Could you help me understand how to stay in compliance?" The transformation was immediate and terrifying. Suddenly, she was all smiles, inviting me in for coffee, a masterclass in psychological manipulation. "I've been HOA president for 8 years now," she boasted, ignoring my previous recording. "In that time, I've successfully managed over 200 violation cases." I asked about consequences. Her eyes lit up. "Well, it depends on the personality type. Some people respond to financial pressure. You keep hitting them with fines until they comply or decide to move somewhere else. Others need more creative approaches. The key is understanding what motivates each individual and then applying the right kind of pressure." She was describing systematic harassment like it was an art form. I was recording everything. That's when Margaret knocked on the door. "Victoria, I hope you don't mind, but I brought some brownies for our new neighbor." As Margaret stepped inside, Victoria's friendly demeanor vanished. "Margaret, we were having a private conversation about HOA business." "Actually, Victoria," as a board member, Margaret countered, her voice firm, "I think I should be included in any discussions about violations or community standards." A board member. That explained Margaret's initial curiosity. After Margaret left, Victoria's mask slipped completely. "Don't mind her," she hissed. "Margaret thinks she knows better than everyone else. Some people are just naturally resistant to authority." Then came the real gold. "I've had to deal with 12 families over the years who thought they could ignore our standards. The last family, the Hendersons, held out for almost 2 years before they finally decided to sell and move away." Her smile turned predatory. "Let's just say they realized that fighting the HOA was more expensive than finding a new place to live. Sometimes you have to make examples of people so that others understand the importance of compliance." She was talking about destroying families' lives like it was a minor inconvenience. I thought about Clara. That evening, I sat in Uncle George's living room, reading his journal. Page after page of harassment. Fines for everything from inadequate flowerbed maintenance to failure to pressure wash the driveway. His final entry read, "Victoria came by today to inspect my property. I'm too old and too tired to fight her anymore. I just want to live in peace." He had died defeated. I opened my laptop and started building the case file. Illegal presidency, made-up violations, systematic targeting of vulnerable residents. She thought she was dealing with another Uncle George, another family she could wear down with bureaucratic torture. She had no idea that every violation notice she sent me was just another piece of evidence for the case I was building against her. The total fine so far, $650. The cost of justice? Priceless. 2 weeks later, Victoria made her most dangerous move. I came home to find my front door slightly ajar. I'm obsessive about locking up, an occupational hazard, so I knew immediately someone had been inside. I walked in, not calling the police right away, because I knew this wasn't a burglary, it was a setup. In my home office, sitting right on my desk, was a manila folder filled with fake business documents, invoices, receipts, and bank statements for accounts that didn't exist. Someone had tried to make it look like I was running a fraudulent business operation out of my home. But I had installed hidden cameras throughout the house on my second day. I pulled up the footage. A middle-aged guy in work clothes picked my lock, spent 12 minutes inside, and planted the evidence in 3 different locations. The most interesting part was his phone call before he left. "It's done. I put the papers where you said. Wait 24 hours, then call the police about suspicious activity. You want them to find everything during the search." I had the whole thing on video, but I still needed Victoria to connect herself directly to the crime. I called her that evening, making sure my voice sounded shaky. "Karen, I need your help. Someone broke into my house today. They didn't take anything, but they left some papers behind that I don't understand. It's like they were trying to make it look like I was doing something illegal." Her fake concern was immediate. "Did they take anything valuable?" "They didn't take anything," I said, playing up the confusion. "But they left some papers behind." Her voice immediately perked up with interest. "What kind of papers?" "Business documents and bank statements." She paused. "You should probably check that wooden desk in your study. Criminals always target that area first. You should also check for anything suspicious near that small safe next to your computer." I felt my heart skip a beat. I had never mentioned a wooden desk, a study, or a safe. "Karen, that's interesting. I never mentioned any of those things. How do you know the exact layout of my house and what the thieves were looking for?" The panic in her voice was immediate and unmistakable. I was just guessing, based on where burglars usually look." "Karen," I said, still recording, "you described the specific locations where someone planted fake documents in my house. The only way you could know those details is if you either broke in yourself or if you told someone else where to put them." The line went silent for 30 seconds. When she finally spoke again, her voice was cold and desperate. "You need to be very careful about making accusations you can't prove. This is a close-knit community, and people who cause trouble don't tend to stay very long." "Is that a threat?" "It's just a fact of life. Those who don't fit in usually find it easier to relocate somewhere more suitable." I hung up. She had just confessed to orchestrating a break-in and evidence planting on a recorded phone call. She'd revealed specific knowledge about my house layout. I had everything I needed to destroy her. I sent her a text message. "You have 24 hours to resign from the HOA and leave this community alone, or I present everything to the police and the neighborhood. Your choice." I knew she wouldn't take the easy way out. People like Victoria always have to push things to the absolute limit, convinced their power will save them. Sure enough, my phone rang 10 minutes later. "You have no idea who you're dealing with," she spat. "I've been running this neighborhood for 8 years, and I have enough dirt on half the people here to bury you 10 times over." That break-in was just the beginning. "Karen," I said calmly, "you just confessed to conspiracy, criminal trespass, and extortion on a recorded phone call, but please keep talking. You're making my job incredibly easy." The line went dead immediately. Tomorrow, I was going to call an emergency HOA meeting. It was time for the whole neighborhood to learn the truth. The community center hadn't been this packed in years. Victoria arrived 15 minutes late, flanked by 2 board members who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. She was dressed in her power suit, surveying the room like a queen. "I understand our newest resident has some concerns about HOA procedures," she announced. "I'm always happy to educate people." Before I could start, Victoria went on the attack. "Actually, I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about Elias Thorne." She pulled out a folder of her own. Fake documents, background checks, employment records, all complete fabrications created by the same thug who broke into my house. He's a professional troublemaker who targets HOA communities across the country, part of an organized network that specifically targets well-managed communities like ours. "That's a very interesting story, Karen," I said, standing up and turning on my projector. "But before we discuss my background, I think everyone here deserves to know the truth about what you've been doing to this community for the past 8 years. The screen lit up with a timeline showing every family that had been forced out. 12 families have left since Karen became HOA president, systematically targeted and harassed. Margaret stood up from the front row. I've been documenting Karen's behavior for 6 years, she confirmed, her voice carrying clearly. I'm also a board member, and I can confirm that every single violation shown on that timeline was either fabricated or selectively enforced. That's when Victoria completely lost control. You people have no idea what I've sacrificed for this community, she shouted, her face turning scarlet. I've spent 8 years maintaining property values, enforcing standards. Do you have any idea how much work it takes? A man in the back row asked. What kind of work? Karen whirled around, her eyes blazing. The kind of work that requires making hard decisions. Ever since my daughter died in that car accident 10 years ago, I swore I would never let this community fall into chaos like the one where she was killed. The room erupted in shocked whispers. I've maintained order when no one else would, she cried, her voice cracking. I've enforced standards. And yes, sometimes that means making examples of people who think they can ignore the rules. The Henderson family, the Morales family, they all learned that actions have consequences. She was listing the names of every family she'd driven out, confessing to years of harassment in front of witnesses. Mrs. Henderson, whom I hadn't realized was in the audience, stood up with tears streaming down her face. You forced us to sell our house because my son has autism, and you said his stymieing behaviors were disruptive to community tranquility. We lost $30,000 selling below market value because you made our lives hell. Another voice. You fined us $800 for excessive Christmas decorations when others had the exact same lights. I let the emotions run their course, then stood up. I think we've heard enough testimonies to establish a pattern. Now, I want to show you something else. I clicked to the next slide. The video footage of Karen's hired thug breaking into my house, followed by the audio recording of Karen describing the exact locations where evidence had been planted. The silence was deafening. Victoria was swaying slightly, her face completely drained of color. Margaret stood up and called for a vote. All in favor of immediately removing Victoria Sterling from her position as HOA president and banning her from any future leadership roles in this community? Every single hand in the room went up. You're all making a huge mistake, Victoria whispered, her voice barely audible. This community will fall apart without proper leadership. She gathered up her fake documents and walked toward the door, turning back one last time. I was protecting you. I was protecting all of you. Then she was gone. I knew this wasn't over. People like Victoria always have one last desperate move. 3 days after the meeting, I woke up to my phone buzzing. Victoria had gone nuclear, contacting every local news station. She'd painted herself as the innocent victim of an elaborate conspiracy. I got the call from Channel 7 News. Mr. Thorne, we'd like to invite you to appear on our evening program tonight to respond to serious allegations made against you by Victoria Winters. She specifically requested that you be given the opportunity to respond directly. I almost laughed. I want to appear live in the same studio as Victoria Sterling so we can address these allegations face to face. That evening, I arrived at the studio. Victoria was already there, looking composed, wearing her best professional outfit. Hello, Elias, she said sweetly. I hope you're prepared for tonight. People deserve to know the truth about what you've been doing to our community. I couldn't agree more, Karen. People absolutely deserve to know the truth. She went first, speaking eloquently about her dedicated service and how outside agitators were targeting well-managed communities. Elias Thorne moved into our community under false pretenses, she said, looking directly into the camera. He's part of a network of professional troublemakers who infiltrate neighborhoods, cause chaos, and then disappear. When it was my turn, I stood up and looked directly at her. You're absolutely right about one thing, Karen. I didn't move into your community under entirely honest pretenses, but not for the reasons you think. I turned to the camera. My name is Elias Thorne, and I'm a government investigator who specializes in HOA abuse cases. The change in Victoria's expression was immediate and devastating. Her confident smile vanished, replaced by a look of pure shock and terror. I pulled out Clara's photograph. My 12-year-old sister, Clara, was driven out of her home and school by an HOA president who used the exact same tactics Karen has been using. This case isn't just professional for me. It's personal. Victoria tried to interrupt. I didn't know. I was just trying to maintain community standards. You targeted 12 families over 8 years, I continued, ignoring her. You forced them from their homes. You embezzled thousands of dollars. And when you realized I wasn't going to be intimidated, you hired someone to break into my house and plant fake evidence. That's not true. I was protecting the community, she cried, tears starting to form. My daughter died because of chaos and lawlessness. I swore I would never let that happen to another community. Karen, I said quietly, your daughter's death was a tragedy, but terrorizing innocent families won't bring her back. The only way to honor her memory is to stop causing pain to others. The studio was completely silent. Then my phone rang. I looked at the caller ID, Clara. I answered on live television. Clara. Her voice was clear and strong. Jordan, I just watched everything. I'm so proud of you. You did what we couldn't do 15 years ago. You protected those families. Thank you for not letting what happened to us happen to anyone else. As I hung up, I looked at Victoria. She was slumped in her chair, completely broken. Her 8 years of lies and manipulation had finally crushed her on live national television. The legal process moved fast. Within 2 weeks, Victoria was arrested and charged with multiple felonies. 3 months later, she was sentenced to 8 years in prison and ordered to pay back $156,000. The neighborhood transformed. Margaret Chun was unanimously elected as the new HOA president. The bylaws were rewritten to include transparency and term limits. Most importantly, we established a community fund to help victims of HOA harassment. 2 months after Victoria's sentencing, I got a call. Elias, it's Clara. I'm graduating next month with my psychology degree, and I want to move back home. I want to help families who've been through what we went through. We turned the empty lot where Victoria had planned her secret development into something meaningful. Clara's Garden, a therapeutic space designed specifically for children and families affected by community trauma. We planted a small oak that would grow strong and provide shade for generations. My phone rang again. Mr. Mitchell, this is Patricia Williams from Sunset Hills. We have a situation with our HOA president, and we've heard you might be able to help us. I looked at Clara, who was watching me with knowing eyes. I'll need to see if there are any available properties in your area, I told Patricia. But yes, I think I can help. Clara laughed. Some things never change, do they? There's always another Victoria out there somewhere. Maybe, I said, looking around at the thriving community that had emerged from Victoria's ashes. But now there are people like us out there, too. People who won't let the bullies win. Justice had been served, and somewhere out there, another Victoria was about to learn that she'd picked the wrong target. What happens when the person who caused 15 years of pain finally faces the family they destroyed? Share in the comments. Have you ever confronted someone who hurt you years ago? How did it go? Don't forget to like and subscribe.